Have you ever been in a situation where you're like, God, I'm trying my best. I'm doing everything right, but my life is not giving what it should give at this point? This was the story of Joseph. Joseph went from being a favorite son to being a slave in Egypt to being in the prison before God intervened and he became a prime minister in Egypt. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. In today's episode, I want to use the story of Joseph as a case study for us to understand when we're in certain seasons of our lives and it seems like God is quiet, but indeed He is working behind the scenes of our lives. Joseph had grace. Everything he touched prospered. Potiphar was like, guy, whatever it is you're doing, keep on doing it because you're getting everything right. Next thing, Joseph becomes the manager of Potiphar's household. And then comes Mrs. Potiphar, Madam Temptation herself. She observed Joseph and she was like, this Hebrew boy, fine like sweet wine. And then she started shooting her shot daily. And Joseph was like, no, Mrs., we are not doing this. And Joseph maintained his boundary. However, Madam Potiphar did not hear word though. One day she grabbed his clothes and Joseph said, I'd rather leave my jacket with you than do this thing you want me to do. Sometimes running isn't weakness, it is wisdom. Some battles are meant to be escaped and not fought. So, what is the lesson I want you to take from this part of the story? Sometimes, before God takes you to the top, your integrity will be tested. So, after doing the right thing, Joseph lands in prison. How do you do the right thing and you end up getting in a worse situation? How do you do the right thing and your situation goes from bad to worse and you're like, God, is this supposed to be my reward for obeying you? God, is this supposed to be my reward for doing the right thing? God, is this supposed to be my reward for taking the right stand? God did not remove Joseph from the prison because that prison was part of the process. That prison was part of Joseph's story. That prison was part of the bigger picture in Joseph's story. So sometimes what looks like punishment is actual positioning, divine positioning that God is well aware of. Now, Joseph being Joseph starts helping people again. He met two prisoners, Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker. They both had dreams. Joseph interpreted the dreams. One of the dreams was good and the other was not good. Sorry, Mr. Baker. And at the end of the day, Joseph tells them, when you go out, please remember me. But guess what? None of them remembered Joseph. One of them was beheaded, and the second one was restored to his place of service in Pharaoh's um, household. 2 whole years, and Joseph remained in prison. One day, Pharaoh has a dream: 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. And Jazin, the cupbearer, was like, "Oh snap! I remember Joseph in the prison. Joseph interpreted my dream." And he told this to Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked that Joseph be brought out of the prison. Joseph comes out of prison, interprets Pharaoh's dream, and he even gave strategy to manage the crisis that was coming. And Pharaoh was like, who else but this guy? Let this guy be the person to manage this whole crisis. And that was how Pharaoh made Joseph the prime minister of Egypt. So now imagine, from a prisoner to a prime minister. Oh no, let's take that back. From being a favorite son to being a slave to being in the prison and now being a prime minister. Do you see how it works? I know when Joseph was sold to slavery, Joseph would be like, this does not align with the dream I had. In my dream, the other people were bowing down to me. So how am I a slave? I know it wouldn't make sense when Joseph was sold to slavery. It wouldn't even make sense when he went from being a slave to being in the prison. How does it get worse than this? Very weird. He called his magicians, his dream interpreters, the people that can tell the future, astrologers. None of them could interpret this dream. But what is the beauty of this story? Joseph rose. Joseph did not rise because he was strategic in planning how he was going to go from being a favorite son to being in the prison to being a prime minister. No, none of that was his own dream. All of these were a story that was intricately woven by God, and God led Joseph through all the process, step by step. Joseph had all the experiences, from a favorite son where I'm sure he was going to be enjoying as his father's favorite son, to being a slave that wasn't a favorable situation, to being in the prison where his freedom was stripped from him. There was no liberty to do anything he wanted to do, as much as he would have done if he remained a slave in Potiphar's house. But then, in all of this, the grand story was there. The dream God gave to him about his life and his destiny in the beginning came to pass, but not the path that he would have thought it would have taken. He wouldn't have imagined prison. He wouldn't have imagined slavery. That prison and slavery were key processes and key experiences Joseph had to go through for him to be able to get to, let me call it, his promised land. There are four things Joseph's story teaches us I want us to take away from this video. The first one, your integrity is your insurance. Even if it is costing you, trust me, it is protecting you. Delays aren't always denials. Even though Joseph was in the prison, even though he was a slave, all those were preparing him for the future. The third one is that God can use your lowest point as your launch pad. The prison was where Joseph's gifts were noticed. Joseph was an excellent slave. That was why he was a manager. But nobody knew that Joseph could interpret dreams as a slave or as a manager of Potiphar's house. He had to be in that prison and had to be inmates with people who were in Pharaoh's direct service for him to, for that skill, for that gifting, for that talent to be noticed. So the lowest point could actually be your launch pad. Elevation doesn't cancel humility. When you get to your palace, don't forget when you were in prison. Dearest listeners, Joseph's story shows that sometimes God doesn't fast track you. God allows you to go through certain processes that might be unfavorable. God takes you through phases and stages in life that you wonder, why do you ever have to go through this phase? Why do you ever have to experience this? Why do you ever have to go through this process? But the thing is that a detour is not denial with God. With humans, detour might be denial, but with God, everything is strategic. Everything is strategic to his timing. Everything is strategic to his positioning. Everything is strategic to that place where he wants you to be. So wherever you are, whether in Potiphar's house, whether in the prison or on your way to the palace, stay faithful. Remember that no season lasts forever. And that is why they are called seasons, because every season comes and goes. And remember, your story might not make sense now, but trust me, at the end, it will all come together. If this story blessed you, if this story spoke to you, maybe you're currently in your season of the prison, in your season of slavery, or you're on your way to your perfection. Like, share, and subscribe. Thank you. See you in my next episode.